Hey artists, today we're going to make some really cool printed fall leaves with a beautiful swirling windy background. Follow along with me and I'll show you all the steps.
So to get started, I like to take just a little scrap of paper and practice drawing some leaves. So to make a simple leaf and to make sure I make it big enough and not too tiny, is I start with just a tall line, and then I'll put a small V shape, a medium V shape, and a large V shape. That gives me kind of the bones of this leaf. Those little veins that are in a leaf, just like I see in this one I found outside. I see that there's the line down the middle, and then there's these V-shape lines. Now I could try to draw a leaf that is this shape by doing just kind of like these little triangle shapes. And that is one kind of leaf that I could try to make today. I could again make that regular line down the middle with the small, medium, and large V shape. And a really simple one is the one that's kind of like a lemon shape. It just goes out and back down. So there's two different kind of leaves I could try. I could also, again, make my tall line and my 3 V's. And I could try kind of the curvy line leaf, kind of like an oak leaf. Another kind of leaf I've seen outside are the ones that are shaped almost like an upside down heart. So once you have practiced drawing some leaves and you have decided which leaf you want to draw, you're going to get your piece of styrofoam. For me in my class, we are using a styrofoam plate. We do not want to draw where you eat. We want to draw on the back. So I'm looking at my leaf here and I'm thinking I will go ahead and do the leaf that looks like this. So I start with my pen and I'm going to draw with my pen a nice line down the center. And then after I draw that center line, I'm going to put those V-shape veins in my leaf, just like I practiced on my paper. I'm doing that on my plate. I don't want it to be too tiny because I want it to show up when I print it. I also don't want it to be too huge, so I'm kind of just going right in the center here. And now I'm going to draw the bumpy line of my leaf. And the stem. Okay, I also want to make sure that I pushed hard enough with my pen that when I touch the foam that there is an indentation, that I can feel where that pen was. Because if you don't push hard enough, it will not show up for your printmaking. Printmaking is almost like making a big old stamp. And so if you want your stamp to show up, those ridges really have to come through. Now I can add some extra detail looking here at some of these other little leaf lines that are in here. And I can add those lines and make my leaf more detailed and honestly a little more exciting by adding those extra lines and making it look cool. All right. So now that I have my printing plate prepared, the next thing I'm going to do is get some different fall leaf colored markers. The trick is they have to be washable markers because that is what is going to react with the wet paper. I'm getting a thicker piece of paper here, and I'm going to just, you can take a sponge and sponge the water, or you could just spray it a little bit. But you want that paper to be slightly wet. So now my paper is slightly damp, so it will absorb the printed ink when we put it on there. Okay, so I think I'm going to start with yellow. So I take my yellow marker and I'm going to color in on my plate inside my whole leaf. Now, if I'm using the tip of my marker, that's the pointy part, it will take me a long time. So I turn my marker to the side so I can color in nice and smooth here. Now, when I press this onto my paper, I don't want to jiggle or move it or it's going to smear my image. So I am just going to take this, find my spot, push down. Now, I'm not hitting this. I'm taking my hand and going in circles, pushing down in circles. And if that starts to hurt your hand a little bit, I like to use my knuckles here and just kind of rub, 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 getting that image to stick. And ooh, there is my leaf printed onto my paper. I can go ahead and get a different color marker. Going to go ahead and color that in. Coloring that whole space with my orange marker now. And you're going to want to print this probably 4 or 5 times, however much it will fit on your page. So I'm not just setting it in the middle, I'm kind of going around, leaving space for me to make more prints. Now I rub, rub, rub to get that ink onto the paper. Then I lift it up and ooh, there's another leaf. I can move on to a different color, covering the entire space of my leaf with my red ink now. All right, always make sure you get the lid back on there nice and tight. Taking this, setting this down, and pushing and rubbing in a circle to make sure I am pressing hard enough that it will put that image onto my paper. And lifting up, there it is. I think I'm gonna try this pinky color. So we just keep adding our ink and then printing it onto the page. Lifting up. And I've got one more color. I'm going to try this brownish copper color. So again, I fill it in. Close it. If there's a space, I want to make sure I push hard enough to hear that click. Get the marker put away, taking this on that last little area, and then I press it down to get the ink onto my page. And voila, I've got my last leaf. So now I have 5 amazing printed leaves, and I'm going to set this on the drying rack and get a different piece of paper so I can make a beautiful windy background for these. So on this nice big piece of paper, I'm going to take a white oil pastel and I'm going to draw some swirling lines to represent the wind. So just big swirls of wind. Now it's not going to show up very well on the camera because it is white oil pastel on white paper. But you are doing some whirling, swirling lines with a white oil pastel. And when we put the paint on, it's going to show up really nicely. Okay, so now I'm going to take my paintbrush and dip into some blue liquid watercolor. And as I'm painting, wow, there it is. It starts to show up. I'm going to paint my paper about 3 sections at a time, like 1 section at a time, 3 sections. And the reason I'm doing that is we are also going to add a little bit of salt to give this a little more texture for our windy day. And so the salt only works if the paper is wet and the paint is wet. So I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to pinch a little bit of salt and I'm going to sprinkle it onto that wet paint. Once you put the salt on, you do not want to paint that area again. You want to leave that salt to do its magic. I'm going to dip back in the paint, and now I'm going to paint my middle section of my paper. So I'm just painting along. And I love how that wind starts to show up that we had drawn with the oil pastel. And I paint down here. And once I get this nicely covered with blue paint, I'll give another sprinkle of salt for the middle section. So I'm gonna reach in here, get a little pinch of my salt, and just kind of sprinkle it along where the wet paint is. And that salt is gonna pull that paint off the paper and start leaving some really cool texture. And now I can paint the bottom section of my picture, taking the brush for the last time across my page and making sure I've got all this a nice blue sky color. And this is gonna look so great with my warm colored leaves, having this blue sky in the background. Whoop, my paper's moving on me. So I'm just gonna spread this over here. And then I'm gonna do one last sprinkle of salt, and it's time to put this beautiful sky background on the drying rack to dry and let the salt do its magical work. I can already see up here that it's starting to pull that color. Now that my picture is dry, I can take my leaves and start to cut them out. I'm going to carefully cut around my leaves to make sure I get all that wonderful detail. And then I'm going to set these leaves to the side so that we can glue them onto our background. Sometimes it's easier if you cut out the leaf first, and then you can go back and do your more detailed cutting with your scissors. So we are just going around the outside of our leaves and cutting each individual leaf out so we can put it on that windy background. So there's my first leaf, and then I can go ahead and go right here. Now on this leaf, it got a little bit faded, and that's okay because once I cut around that, it'll have a nice smooth edge. So we're just cutting out each leaf one at a time, setting them over here to the side and getting ready so we can glue them onto our beautiful watercolor background. And I'm excited to show you what it looks like now that the salt has done its work and this windy sky just looks so amazing. All right, I got those all cut out, and now I can start gluing them to my background. So I'm going to take these leaves. Now, one thing I want to think about as I'm gluing, if I want them to look like they're blowing in the breeze, and there's that beautiful background. Look at how that salt put all that cool texture on there. If they're blowing in the breeze, are they going to be standing up and down like little soldiers? Probably not. That looks really stiff. So what I want to think about is how these leaves are blowing and flowing with the wind. And so I'm probably going to have them kind of moving in different directions to show that they're moving with that windy day. Now, before I go ahead and glue, I do want to go ahead and scoop any extra salt off. And we can just sweep that off our table afterwards. So there's that awesome background. We're going to use some squeezy glue. I'm going to put just a very thin line around the back. If you go too close to the edge, it will come out and get onto your paper, which you don't want. So I'm going to put like a little line there, and I'm going to have this one coming down like this. Now they are going to curl up, so I will show you my solution to that. So I put just a little thin line around, and I can have one flowing up that way. And I just put a skinny, skinny little line of glue. I'll have this one going this way. Skinny line of glue. Be that way. And I put the glue on my final one. Ooh, where do I want to put this one? There's so many options. I think I'm going to put it over here. Okay, to get these to stick down, I'm going to turn my paper over onto the back. And now I can kind of rub and push and get that glue to go ahead and stick these on really well. And then when I turn my paper over, oh my goodness, what a cool fall picture. We have our warm colored leaves floating in that beautiful, cool colored sky with our wind and our texture. I can't wait to see the fall sky you create.